Joining us now, dual threat analyst, national champion at BYU, and the best hair in Kaysville, top 10 hair in Provo. Yep, we're bringing it back again.
Yeah, working on it.
We're bringing it back again. You can't get away.
You know, the pressure that you guys put on me, though.
Like now, when you're combing your hair, are you thinking about it?
So here's the deal. Like, I can't even. I go out now, and Brendan's like, "Hey, let's run over." I'm in sweats. Hey, let's run over and do such and such. Let's go over to Riverwoods. I'm like, just a minute. I have to check my hair. because now it's made it into the top 10 in Provo. I can't go out with my hair looking like this.
Yeah.
So then I go and I fluff it a little bit and I get it ready to roll because I don't want somebody to see it out there and for me to go out of that top 10. Once you get into the top 10, you have a thirst to stay there. I don't want to be out of the top 10. So you guys have ruined me. I can't go out of the house with a hair out of place.
Sorry, Brenda. Really, we're affecting your relationship now with her. So.
Oh, my goodness.
All right, Blaine. What a weekend. The Super Bowl was off the charts good. We have focused our Twitter conversation down to what was your favorite moment from the BYU Sports weekend. Then we'll get some generic thoughts from you in relation to specific BYU teams. But what was your top moment from the BYU Sports weekend?
So mine's going to be different than anybody's, except for maybe one other person, because mine came behind the scenes. So mine came in after shoot-around when Dave McCann and I got to sit down with Dave Rose for about 45 minutes after practice and talk to him about 300. And so that was a way behind the scenes moment where he didn't want to talk about it. He's like, you know what? It started out with, I just can't wait to get it over with because I just don't want the focus to be on me. I want to get it behind us and it's a cool thing, but I'm tired of talking about it. I don't want to talk about it. The focus needs to be on these guys. And so he's constantly trying to defer the credit for what has been a remarkable coaching career here. And Dave and I said, no, guess what? We're talking about it. We want to talk about it. And he's like, okay. So then we got into it, and it was really, really fun. The gratitude that he has. And we asked him, did you ever expect that you would get to 300? And he goes, guys, in this profession, whether it's at BYU or someplace else, you never expect to be in a spot long enough to get to that.
Yeah.
He goes, so no, I had no thought that I would ever get to 300 wins. No. And he goes, and when I think about it, I just reflect on all the players. And he started to go through player after player that he just named over his career that had an impact. And he started to talk about people in the administration that have had an impact. He talked about coaches in other sports that have had an impact. I mean, the level of gratitude that he has to be here as long as he has and to coach the players that he's coached and to work with the assistant coaches and the coaches in other sports and the administration that he's worked with here. I just thought it was awesome, and it really gave me a reflection or a view into the man and how grateful he is, how gracious he is, how thankful he is. And I walked out of there, I'm like, oh man, 300 wins couldn't come to a more grateful person. So that was my moment. My moment was the behind the scenes conversation with Dave Rose about what 300 meant to him. And the exclamation point on it was that he says, you know what, a few years ago with the health scare that I had, I didn't know that I'd be around.
Seriously.
Yeah, and so he says, I don't have a day that goes by. I never have a game that goes by that I'm just not grateful that I'm healthy enough to be out there and to coach. So then we had a chance to go broadcast the game, to watch him get to 300. So after that conversation, to watch him get to 300 was really gratifying. So that was my big thing for the weekend. So I got a glimpse behind the scenes that most people don't get a chance to get. I'm grateful that I had a chance to do that.
Yeah, that's a big deal because, one, the health scare with pancreatic cancer, and two, that he's been here long enough to do that, and his consistency has been amazing. And now he's got this kind of young group, and BYU people are hoping that this group can turn into next year something significant.
Yeah, and I think they will. I mean, you think about what he's done. He's averaged almost 26 wins a season through the first 11. And
bonkers.
He's going to get, Dave and I were trying to do the math, he's going to get close this year. I don't know that he gets to 26, but he could get to 23, 24, depending on NIT type things. Who knows? Could they win the conference tournament? So you're telling me there's a chance.
You just got a massive smile.
Not likely, right? Because Gonzaga is really good, like really good. And I've seen him a couple times this year, watching him in our place the other night. They're just so deep and so talented, and all the right pieces are there. Mark's got, without question, the best team he's ever had up there. Could BYU win the tournament and go to the NCAAs? Yeah. But what's more likely? They get into the NIT. They win a couple of games in the NIT. They could have another season that's 25 wins, 24 wins. Again, Stan Watts averaged under 17
And they
a
played
season.
fewer games.
Right.
back then.
But not we went and looked at that. You'd be surprised. They had 30-game seasons back then. That was my first reaction was, well, they played a lot fewer games. A few fewer games, but they had seasons where they played that many games. And so partly it's that. But what Dave has done is remarkable. And we all ought to stand back and recognize it what it is. Because it's been with different types of teams and different types of players, yet consistently he just goes out and does it. So we're going to be 10 years from now or 15 years from now, we're going to look back and understand how good Dave Rose was more than we do now.
Because he makes the extraordinary, and by that I mean, 25, 26 wins a season, kind of seem ordinary. Do BYU fans take what he's done for granted?
I think we do as a group. And I think our expectations, because now we go, well, look, he's won 25.7 games a year with guys that were never highly regarded the way this group is. So why aren't they at 30 wins this year? I mean, that the bar is so high because he set the standard. He's the one that set the standard that high. So everybody expects that they're going to be this good. And until I do think that this team's getting better. And the one thing that people don't see behind the scenes with this team is I think Dave would just like to have the same guys healthy for practice for 2 weeks in a row, which he hasn't had. Last week, Nick, going into the game, Emery, was not healthy with the flu, so he missed practices and played sparingly. He had Elijah at the beginning of the season miss all of camp going into the season and be playing sparingly until now. Then he tweaked his other knee in the Gonzaga game. Didn't practice going into the game Saturday, but played in the game
I
Saturday.
would have liked to have known that from going for 2 picks.
You have Kyle. Yeah, I know. I should have told you. You have Kyle Davis, who they expected to be a senior leader on this team, that has a season-ending injury, and so they've had a hard time having the same guys in practice for 2 weeks in a row, and they're not because they're not deep because they're young with their starters. And then the guys that come off the bench, they don't have some senior guys. A guy like Chapman, had he stayed here, would have been huge for this basketball team in terms of stability and understanding and being in the understanding and been in these situations in the past and coming in off the bench and playing. A guy like Frank Bartley, if he was still here. And those guys left, and that hurts the depth that BYU has right now. And he doesn't have senior guys to come in and to bring stability to it. And so they go up and down, which is expected for a team that has youth. And they're having a hard time knowing who the alpha dog is on the guard line. When they get in a position where they get in a tough situation in the second half, I think they're still having a hard time knowing, okay, so is TJ the guy right now? Or is Eli the guy right now? And you have to be really, really good, you got to be good on the guard line because you can take away a big guy down the stretch by just packing it in. And the teams that are good have guys that can take the ball off the dribble and create their own shot. And I'm still not sure that BYU knows who that guy is supposed to be, but eventually that will come. And so what happens is you get to the end of games, and the ones that they've lost this season they shouldn't lose, it's like, wait a minute, why is Yoli taking that shot right now? And, that was just a forced shot. Because I think guys think, I got to take over now because that's the guy I was in high school. And until they can practice for 2 weeks together with all the same guys and get into some of these tough games and recognize who that guy is, it's going to be a little bit up and down. But I do think defensively they've gotten better every game. And I think next year they come back. I've said this before the season started, right? This year is a learning year. I expect them to win 20 games this year, which I believe they will do. And then next year is a big year when they understand their roles, they're together for a whole off season, and those parts and pieces come together. So.
Blaine Fowler with us on BYU Sports Nation. Tricky road trip for BYU coming up at Pepperdine in a place they haven't played particularly well in the West Coast Conference campaign. And then at San Francisco, who is playing some pretty good basketball. BYU is currently 1 game ahead of San Francisco and Santa Clara in the West Coast Conference standings. And I thought Jaron brought up a great point. While we all just kind of assume BYU is going to finish third, what kind of a chance is there that they don't finish in the top 3 and they slide to that number 4 spot?
They don't want to be in the 4th spot, and they understand that. So I think there's a sense of urgency that you don't want to play. You want to get to the finals and play the Zags. So you don't want to be in the 4th spot and play them in the semis. That's not good. This team is a fantastic basketball team. They are a Final Four team if they stay healthy and get the right seeding in the right bracket, right? You want to play them in the finals of the conference tournament, not in the semifinals. So BYU understands that. What I saw defensively in the second half of the last 2 games, so against Gonzaga and then again on Saturday, was a team that understood the effort that's required to play good defense. if they'd have played with the effort they played in the Gonzaga game, in the losses to the two teams, like in the San Diego game, they don't lose to San Diego if they can play with that kind of effort. And so I think that light bulb has finally gone on with, oh, you know what? When the chips are on the line, this is how we have to defend down the stretch to win a game. So I think they're going to have more success, even if it's on the road, down the stretch against those types of teams that they should beat. They're going to understand how to lock down defensively. Because now I've seen it 2 games in a row. Now it's a pattern. That 1-3-1, they are playing it really, really active now. I love, you mentioned it, what Davin Gwynn's been doing with his boost that he brings defensively off the bench. Everybody's getting it now defensively. They still struggle to decide who's going to be the guy with a shot. But I'm satisfied that if they can play defense like that down the stretch, they'll win games, even if they're still confused about who the man is down the stretch.
Gwynn Sanity was my answer to the question.
To me, he was the X factor. You could make a point that he was the MVP of the game, even though, Mika had a great game and TJ had a great game. He was the one that was the difference maker down the stretch when they had to have plays. He made plays, so you could make a case for him as the MVP of the game Saturday.
Blaine, great stuff. Sorry to put the pressure on your hair.
Oh gosh.
Well, sorry, not sorry, right?
I'm gonna have to live with it. I'm gonna have to live with it.
Something you got to do,
Some people
man.
have a target on their backs. I have a target on my head, and that's okay.
It's the worst place to have a target,
Yeah.
Blaine.
Hey, before we go, you guys have talked about all of these things, and I just mentioned this in the control room before I came in. So my year is going to be complete. After all, this year in sports has been phenomenal, right? When Tiger comes from 6 strokes down in the Masters on Sunday,
Wow.
and he wins this thing, then my year is going to be
You need more than
an
blue
oh
goggles for
my
that.
goodness.
Giant ones.
Yeah, the giant ones are
giant
here.
ones.
Tiger
Giant-
comes
there
from.
you go.
Don't you think you guys mentioned all these things. When Tiger comes from 6 strokes down on Sunday,
Blue goggle alert.
and he wins the
Blue goggle
Masters,
alert.
my
Blue goggle
sports
alert.
year is
Blue
going to be
goggle
complete.
alert.
Blaine Fowler, ladies and gentlemen, calling his shot for Tiger Woods.
Now that's crazy.
to
It's time to
create-
go to break.
the most unlikely year in sports coming to a point in the Masters.
Thank you, Cyclops.
Wow.